Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operator standing by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Coming now into the 20th century, not the 21st, the 20th. That's far enough for me. Taking your emails at jackberkman2016 at gmail. Same number, same email if you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery. What a topic here. D.C. McCallister joins us. For those of you who don't know her, and that's probably only a few, she's a contributor at the Federalist, PJ Media, and Daily Wire. D.C., welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Such a great name. It almost sounds like a stage name. Let me say this now. Have you seen this Gillette ad? They basically, with this ad, they are suggesting that all men somehow are terrible, are sexual predators, need to be controlled, need to be watched, need to watch each other. The left has warned us for years about stereotypes, and now it would seem to me they make the biggest stereotype of all, men. Half the population. Am I right?
You are. It doesn't sound like good marketing strategy for a company that's trying to target men to buy their products.
They're not selling to women. Gillette doesn't. I mean, they sell maybe a few things to women, but I would think they're 93% male products, right?
Right. Yeah, and they think that they're calling men to be more conscious driven in order to be better and be the best that you can be is now driven by a feminism ideal, and Gillette has glammed onto this kind of woke notion, and it's backfiring, I believe.
You know, of course, yes, we have to stop sexual harassment and all those things, but all of this has become part and parcel of a much bigger, more dangerous issue in the society, and that is the terrible rise of feminism. And to me, all of this, when you talk to young women in big cities, I mean, if you ask a young girl in a big city like Washington or New York or Boston what's on her mind, she doesn't say sexual harassment. She doesn't say workplace opportunity. You know what she says? I can't find a man. Find me a rich man. They say that more now than they did 40 years ago. Is that your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people ultimately want good relationships. They want relationships. And the sad thing is, with the breakdown of the family, a lot due to modern feminism, people are not finding the kind of companionship that they want. And a sad thing also is that by tearing down masculinity, femininity is not finding its complement. And we need men to be men in order for us to truly be women. But this isn't the way that intersectional feminism today is going. It wants to tear down men because it's a power dynamic. And they see white men in particular, but men as being at top of the hierarchical structure, and the patriarchy still reigns, and that they need to be pulled down and judged as a collective.
Women and men aren't the same thing, right?
You're all guilty.
Women and men aren't the same thing. I mean, you know, I've watched for years, and I'm a traditional guy. I've watched for years women in politics. I mean, you know how stressful it is for a woman to run for Congress? You know how hard that is on a woman's body? Men and women aren't the same thing. The male is a rough, tough animal. You can throw him here, throw him down. He gets up the next morning and runs and jumps and does things. A woman's not like that, right? I mean, they're not the same animal.
No, I mean, equality in society between the sexes is equality before the law, equality of people not standing in the way of your opportunities, not making your opportunities for you. But men and women, by nature, by how they react to things and respond in their different roles, are very different. And they're good in both their roles and both their natures. We don't need to be like the other in order to be equal, but this notion of equality has gone.
I love that. We don't need to be like the other to be equal. I like that. I like that because God gave us a Bible and God gave us rules where he set out men and women to be equal but different, right?
Right.
Equal but different.
Well, we have equal value, we have equal meaning and purpose, and we have equal attributes that he has given us as human beings, rational, emotional, and this, moral. But we have equal legal rights, as human beings. But we do not have, but to force one into the mold of the other is to degrade the sex itself.
I mean, think about like when I went to law school in the 80s, where it was really transformative. Like we had a Georgetown Law, I think in 1988, the class was like 22% female, and that was considered at the time an enormous amount. But yet I could see how hard it is on a woman to do something like that because, they get out of school, they're 25, 26 years old, then they have to go to a law firm, then they're in debt, then they need to work 5 or 6 years, then the society expects them to be a mom and have children. I mean, the mountain, my mother said 35 years ago, she said, America will be all screwed up in the future, and the reason is that young girls won't know what they're supposed to be. And she's exactly right, isn't she?
Well, she is. I mean, we've lost our way, and women have been told you can do it all and have it all, and we're finding, it's very difficult to do it all and have it all. And instead of really taking a look at ourselves and our values, and we are turning it back on men and saying, men, you have to be equal with us and carry the same exact loads. And so now men are burdened with raising households and working, and a lot of times divorced, with paying a lot of child support to women who have left them. So it's a mess, and it's all this vying and competitive nature of power that's going on instead of really working together.
But of course, the losers are women, right? If you watch television, you think women are winning, but of course they're losing. They're losing big time. They're winning on the world of CNN, but 90% of American women are losing in a catastrophic way. Do you agree?
Well, they are, but I think we're all losing. I think men are losing too. Everyone's suffering, and women think that they're not, but yeah, they are, and so are men, because there's been a disruption in this fundamental relationship that is the building blocks of society.
Where do you see this going, DC? Where does all this go? Is any of this going to improve? In other words, so the feminists have hijacked the Me Too movement and taken it into the stratosphere. So something that starts out good, getting the bad guys, the Harvey Weinsteins and the Kevin Spaceys and all that stuff, get the bad guys. But now it goes much further than that. And now they want to get everybody. And now they want to look back 55 years and we're going to sack Dustin Hoffman for something that happened in 1969 and all that stuff. It gets crazy. Where is all this going?
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because you're having a coalescing of group dynamics fighting each other. And politically and socially, this is going to cause a breakdown of the structures in society that save us from a more tyrannical type governmental structure. So politically, it's very dangerous. Socially, it's just going to lead people to more isolation, more dysfunction, more pathologies, and it's also going to create more backlash from men. It's going to cause conflict. Conflict will be the result, and out of that conflict and out of those ashes will reform. But I think we're going to have to go down the bad path.
Things like the Me Too movement, one of the ill effects is they kind of separate further men from women. So, and many people will say I'm a sexist for saying this, but take a law firm. I'm a lawyer, so I know those environments where you have legal secretaries and paralegals. Now, for most of these women, if they're single, one of the only chances they have in their lives to rise or do something is effectively to marry a lawyer. Now, while we all oppose sex harassment, the effect of all this is we're keeping them apart because men become afraid even to talk to them in the work environment. So the men will go out and get other women, but the big losers, of course, are the secretaries and the paralegals because you take away what they need. Do you agree?
Well, this has been one of the problems in the workplace with this, is that men are afraid to talk to women, so they're not associating with women. They're not pulling women into the conferences. They're not hiring the women.
They're scared of them.
They don't trust the women.
They're afraid because,
there's a breakdown.
I had a member of Congress tell me the other day, he said, I'm afraid of all this stuff. He said, I never once discriminated on the basis of gender, but now I'm afraid to hire women, certainly beautiful women, because somebody's going to tell me I'm harassing. So now the office is all male.
Exactly.
Except the scheduler. That's it. Other than that, it's male.
It's also breaking down, not just in the office, but just in relationships. I mean, you feel awkward and men don't trust you. And, it's a breakdown in relationships again. And we work best when we work together. And instead, we don't trust each other. And that causes all kinds of path dysfunction.
D.C. McCallister, contributor at the Federalist, PJ Media, and the Daily Wire. This Gillette thing, I'll tell you, maybe it's time to boycott Gillette. We'll be thinking about that. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
all the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operator standing by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Taking your emails now as we come into the 20th century, not the 21st, but the 20th. Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail. 2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we are investigating. The Profiling Project is investigating. It will never quit on the Rich family, never quit on the city of Washington. On we go. We will fight the good fight. Joining us now, Michael Daugherty, director at the National Cybersecurity Society, and a board member at Snoop Wall, the global leader in affordable breach protection. I love that, Michael. Snoop Wall, welcome.
Hey, how are you? Thanks.
That's a catchy. Nice to have you. I don't think we've ever had you before, Michael.
I don't think so.
Well, so many things. I mean, privacy. This is a big libertarian show, and on this program, we hate the NSA, and we hate the FBI, and we hate all these data gatherers out there. But one of the pet peeves that has really caught my attention, and this is something you probably know a lot about, TVs and smart TVs. The televisions we buy are collecting all kinds of data on us, and because of computer chips or whatever, and the people we buy these TVs from apparently are selling this data to a variety of entities. It could include China, Russia, Chinese companies, European companies, the U.S. government, God knows who else. Am I right?
Well, of course, because that's everyone's learned those little chips are really powerful, and everyone's learned that is going to make them money, and people think it's free. So our flat panels, we're learning, are really inexpensive because now manufacturers are seeing them as an annuity business. Get the TV in the house, then you can have a revenue stream selling the information you glean from the television of what they watch, where it's located, what the habits are, what upsell programs you can sell. And so, it's a variability between manufacturers at this point, and it's a variability in what you can control. Your name and address aren't going there.
Why don't we do we need laws that simply block the transfer of this kind of data?
At some point it's hard to, it's tough because what happens is we're giving up our rights, and it's hard for laws to tell you what you can't do. And we are checking the boxes.
Why don't we just start blocking the sale of data like that? We could criminalize the sale of data. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
No. It's a little over the top because, look, a knife can cut, and it can cut a fillet or it can kill. And throwing the baby out the bathwater and data analysis would hurt efficiency and product improvement and anticipation. Well,
but is there any baby, or is it really all bathwater? I mean, that's the question.
No, there's both. That's my very point. It is both, and going to one extreme of an all or none is not going to work with the both. And that's the trouble. But we do have to do something, and whether it be through antitrust, because let's face it, Congress for the last 100 years has been built to be a nothing. Congress has created these regulators that have full power. And they have immunity, and they have no accountability. And in this country, we have regulation that is outrageous.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, scaling back the regulars, scaling back the deep state. If I were president, all of that would be my top priority. That's a topic for another day. But let's look at these TVs. So I walk into the store, and like a lot of people, I want to buy a cheap TV. So I buy a $500 TV as opposed to a $3,000 plasma screen or what have you. And now, as it turns out, the cheaper TVs actually throw off more data than the others. Is that right?
I don't think necessarily because they're cheaper, but I mean, a smart television is going to throw off data, and whether the company is going to use the data to manufacture is really a choice of the manufacturer. And
how does this work? So, not to interrupt, but I buy a TV, I take it home. Now, how are they getting the data? How does all this? Tell me how this works mechanically.
Well, I mean, it's all wireless. It's all it's all like GPS and wireless type of technology that knows where things are, and has data available. And then when you turn on those features of hooking up your smart television features, you are going to click a box, and you're not going to read the fine print, and you're going to scroll down, and you're going to miss the whole thing, and it's all or nothing, and you're not going to pay attention, and you're going to give them permission.
What happens if we have a federal statute?
And it doesn't have to be your TV, man. That's your cell phone too. So
what if we just enact a federal statute that says when you purchase any of these 18 products and enumerate them, you automatically own the data and no one can use it? What about that?
That would be a great solution. I don't know that it'll ever happen. Because you've got Congress and you've got lobbyists and you've got these companies now they're wealthier than most countries that are building massive places in town. So I don't, you're not going to get, I don't know if you're going to get any Democrats to do it. I mean, or Republicans. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think we have to empower people more than just, clicking on the box. We are clicking on the box. And we're not getting it, and the media and Congress isn't educating us and protecting us. We're learning this after the cow's already out of the barn.
Can we educate consumers to somehow disarm the GPS in devices?
Well, that's going to kill your whole phone. I mean, it's all codependent. So you're not no. People use that. I mean, you can't just disarm that. They're not. There's certain you can go in and disarm some things, and you have to go down and be motivated enough to learn what that is, phone model by phone model versus what you've got. But it's not. Unfortunately, there's nothing black and white, and the cloud is.
Do we need a campaign of fear? Do we need a libertarian campaign of fear to make the public afraid of all this so they react? Is that what we need? Maybe a good campaign of fear.
Smart enough to understand. I mean, you can scare people that are smart enough to be scared.
That's a good point.
I mean, but you have to. How are you going to get the platform to make them afraid? We don't have a media anymore that does any true investigative journalism or informs people. We have a media that thinks that everyone that works at Facebook and Amazon and Google is a wonderful person. So you should be afraid, and you should be afraid because of what the minority of bad people can do. Most of smartphones and all these most of the time are great, but they've also empowered.
You know where this is going, Michael. You know where all this is going. It all feeds into a broader conclusion, don't you? It feeds into a broader conclusion that technology is incompatible with democracy. Is that where this is going?
No, I don't think so. I mean, no, I don't think so. I think, and plus we don't have a democracy, and we don't have a government that operates like that. We're still because the U.S. government hasn't been a democracy or even a republic since the early 1900s. And we don't know that because there's not a civics book that has been honestly teaching us what our government's like. What we're taught is 19th century government operations. It just doesn't exist, and that's why people don't know. And the government likes to have people not know. So they're sold something that doesn't exist, which creates this anarchy and split in the population. And that's fine with them. Keep everyone divided and conquered, and then run through the middle of the football field. And that's what the D.C. swamp does. And that's why they're freaking out that Trump's president.
Does Trump finally, Michael, I think we got to go. Michael Daugherty, so sorry. I wish we had more time to keep talking. Michael's director of the National Cyber Security Society and a board member at Snoop Wall, the global leader in affordable breach protection. And I will tell you, behind the curtain, we'll stay on this issue. We will be watching the watchers. We will be watching the people who watch you. Apple, Google, Yahoo, watch out. Because we are watching you. Thanks.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. If you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Coming into the 20th century, not the 21st, we're now taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Now, same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we need to hear from you. And we now have underway the investigation into the death of Bree Payton, my friend, beautiful young woman, tragically died supposedly of the flu. But we are digging deeper. The Profiling Project is digging deeper. We are on it. We are now, the Profiling Project officially is now looking into both the Seth Rich matter, as always, and of course, the affair of Bree Payton. Stay with us for more announcements. There'll be more on Bree in the next few weeks. Joining us now, Peter Pitts, founder, Center for Medicine and Public Interest, former FDA Associate Commissioner, visiting professor, University of Paris Medical School, Descartes Medical School. Peter, welcome.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Are you joining us from Paris?
Unfortunately not, but soon enough.
Now, Pitts, the only other time I've heard that name, Billy Pitts, the famous staffer for Bob Michael on the Hill for many, many years, now retired. Any relation to Billy?
No relation, but I wish that I was. I hear that a lot, and I'll take that as a compliment.
Billy, you've heard that around Washington. You've heard everybody knows Billy Pitts. Well, now we know you, Peter, and we thank you for joining us. Okay, I want to talk to you about this issue of drug prices and all of these things in which you have expertise. I mean, like a lot of people, you know, if I had been president in 2009, I would never have done healthcare or anything like that. But the few things I might have done is I might have done a little bit of price control with drugs, because if people are dying, the government should help them get their drugs. I mean, I'm a conservative. I'm not an anarchist. Government has some role. So I might be on board for some of that. But, of course, the devil's in the details. Once you go into that, what happens is the drugs aren't manufactured anymore, and then people don't really have the drugs. Now you have Elizabeth Warren calling for massive new regulations on drugs. I don't even think she understands the regulations she's calling for, but she's calling for regulations on drugs, much like she wants regulations on financial products, dogs, cats, and everything else. What say you?
You know, when people say my drugs are too expensive, what they generally mean is my copay at the pharmacy is too expensive. And that's true. But, you know, drug companies don't set copays. You know, the price that you read about new drugs in the Wall Street Journal really have no relevance what people actually pay at the pharmacy. So if we want to give greater access to people, if we want to reduce their out-of-pocket expenses, it becomes an ecosystem situation. And like you said, it's complicated. And blaming drug companies doesn't get the job done.
But of course, isn't the reason there's a copay because the insurance company then has to pay a high price for the drug back to the company? Is that the reason, or are there other reasons?
Actually, it's exactly the reverse. These payers, these pharmacy insurance companies generally get 30, 40, 50% discounts, sometimes even more. And rather than passing along those discounts to the consumer in the forms of lower copays, they charge the consumer based on the list price. So they're basically trying to get paid coming and going. These are large for-profit companies, and they're being dragged kicking into the sunshine, which is a good thing. But, you know, there are people who love to hate drug companies. It resonates. Politicians love it. It's more complicated, and it's time to realize that there are a lot of players here that can help fix the problem if they choose to, and or they can keep pointing the fingers at each other and pocketing.
So it's kind of like when my mother owned the restaurants back in the 70s, and November 1 would come, and Lou Greenberg, the guy that did all the produce and tomatoes and all that, would call and say, Betty, I got to double the price of tomatoes because there was a frost and all the tomatoes were gone. She would say, but Lou, there was no frost. Isn't that what's happening here? I mean, is that a good analogy for this? In other words, the insurance companies are looking at these. They know that the public knows that drug prices are high, so they're capitalizing on the perception. Isn't that what's happening here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why Congress and state legislators are saying that, listen, if we're doing business with these payers, these third-party intermediaries, we want to guarantee that a certain percentage of these discounts will be passed along to our citizens. I think that's exactly the right thing to do. I mean, sometimes the simplest solution is the best. But at the end of the day, just driving down the list price or forcing the list price to be on drug ads doesn't accomplish anything other than beat up drug companies, which, of course, checks the box for a lot of political imperatives, but it doesn't solve the problem for consumers at the point of dispensation at the pharmacy. And that's really what's got to change.
One of the things I'm no expert in healthcare, although I play one on TV. One of the things that strikes me is the Affordable Care Act. Obama in 2010 did everything to regulate healthcare, but those few things that he probably should have done, because for all the massive federal communist regulation that they brought in with the ACA in 2010 and 11, and then subsequent years with the regulators, they really didn't do much to help out the situation with drug prices or stop the insurance companies from charging high copays, right?
That's right. In fact, what we learned from the Affordable Care Act, I mean, we learned lots of things, but we learned that having a health insurance policy in your name is not the same thing as having access to the health care that you need, and certainly not quality health care, and certainly not free health care like in Europe, whatever that means. We have to
whatever that means. I'll give you a clue, Peter. It doesn't mean much.
That's exactly right. But, the sound bites sound good. And when things don't work out, you want to find big, evil pharmaceutical companies to point the finger at. What people need to stand up and demand is that they get access to the care that they need, what their doctors want them to have, rather than Uncle Sam becoming Uncle Sam MD, or having large insurance companies pocket all these discounts and then point the fingers at somebody else. So
why did Obama and Pelosi 10 years ago walk away from all this? Did they walk away from it because this was the implicit deal they made with the drug companies? In other words, they say, all right, Big Pharma, you're going to go along with the package at the end of the day, which they effectively did, but we're going to let you do X, Y, and Z. And they said to the insurance companies, we're going to let you do A, B, and C. Was this a big part of how it passed?
I'll tell you, I think the reason that the ACA was designed the way that it was designed very badly, is that it was actually designed to fail. Obama and his party said, listen, we'll do this big health care reform, and see, it didn't work. What we really need is one single payer, big government health plan. We tried everything else. Now we need government to take over. So I think in many respects it was designed to fail so they can say, you see, what we really need is government health care.
Yeah, but that's stupidity. I mean, is Obama really that dumb? I don't think he's that dumb, because he knows wouldn't he know that that's not going to happen? He's got to know that if this fails, the country's not going to go to single payer. I mean, it could have happened, but it would have taken many, many things to happen in between. Odds are they never would have happened, and they didn't, right?
Well, you'd think so, except for all the people now who are running for president who are calling for Medicare for all, an unaffordable proposition that would reduce the quality of health care in this country, and it's getting traction in the mainstream media. So, sometimes people plan to fail so they can put something even worse in place. I'd like to say they were smart, but I think they're simply political and they're ideologically driven, which is where we are right now.
Peter, let me ask you a question. You're an expert. I'm glad to have you. I've asked this question to so many members of Congress. I've asked this question to liberals. I was on, what's his name on MSN, Lawrence O'Donnell's show about 6 months ago. I asked this to him. He's a Harvard Law graduate. He didn't even try to answer the question. So let me ask it to you, because you're a straight shooter. In 1965, when Medicare was created, it's a two-part question. We'll start with this. In 65, when Medicare was created, why did the government not just simply buy private health insurance for seniors? Wouldn't that have been better, 10 times cheaper? Why did they could buy it in bulk, they could bid it, treat it like a defense contract, whatever. Why would you create a system? I mean, why? Tell me why.
Well, I think one, it's government control. It's just like with education. Why do we have a state education department when we can simply give every student or their parents $10,000 to buy proper education? These plans are designed the way they are so the government can get bigger and decide what's best for our citizens. The simplest answer, the whole Balaam's razor thing makes a lot of sense. You have to ask yourself, not just healthcare, but almost every other domestic government policy, why wasn't it done the most logical, simplest way? And the answer is because that does not serve.
I wonder, though, it took a lot in the 60s for people like Ted Kennedy, who was a new senator from Massachusetts at the time. How did he get people like Everett Dirks and the liberal Republicans? They all went along with this various compromises. But why didn't the liberal Republicans stand up and say, okay, we'll do this Medicare thing, but we're going to do it with private insurance. That's cheaper and better. Why didn't they just come out and say that? I don't understand why. This had a weird dynamic to it, don't you think?
It certainly does. I mean, it'd be great to be able to go back in time and explain to people the unintended consequences of their votes in Congress. I think a lot of times these were relatively small programs at the time.
In other words, they didn't foresee. This was little stuff. Ted Kennedy sold this as little stuff. He sold it to Republicans as little stuff for the extreme
poor. The demographics change radically.
Little stuff.
The cost of healthcare changes radically.
I get it. He said this is just little stuff for people who are really in trouble. I get it. Okay, now let's fast forward. Second part of my question. I asked this question as well. Okay, that's a good answer. That's enlightening. Now, second part of the question, part B. Fast forward to 2009. Why is it that, with the Affordable Care Act, they play with all these tax credits and these massively complicated mechanisms? Wouldn't it have been easier just to say, it's an all-Democratic Congress. Why didn't Republicans just say, why don't we compromise with Obama and just buy private insurance for that group that both needs it and wants it, instead of all this complex scheme? Wouldn't that have been better and cheaper as well?
I think that's exactly right. Plus, it would have kept broader, freer choice. Remember back in the days of, if you like your private insurance, you can keep it. That turned out to be a lie, because what government wants is to be able to control all the various levers of the marketplace so that it can run everything. Because I think its real cognitive belief is that the individual doesn't have the smarts to make their own choices.
But you wouldn't even need these exchanges. I mean, this is so complex. It's literally 1,000 pages. You don't need any of this. Like, why don't you just say, if you don't have private insurance, and if you want it, you go to this website and the government will buy you baseline disaster protection with a $10,000 deductible. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, that to me might make good policy sense.
It certainly makes sense to me. But again, I think it says to the government, gee, we're going to allow people to make their own choices. That can't happen. We have to put into place very complicated Byzantine mechanisms to control every lever of the market. And we'll go down in a blaze of glory if it doesn't work. But we're going to try to make it.
I fault the Republicans even.
Possible.
But it was a close vote on the ACA. It was 218 or 219 in the House. I mean, the Republicans had some leverage. They didn't. Everybody says Brian did a good job. Communications, authored his own bill. All he did was mirror Obama. Why didn't they come out and say that? Say, look, we're going to keep this simple. We're just going to buy insurance for those who need it and want it. Wouldn't that have been simple, clear, and changed the debate? Why were Republicans so remiss in not coming forth with that?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think there was a lot of political pressure brought to bear to pass a bill that nobody read. Like Nancy Pelosi said, we've got to pass it before we realize what's in it. But you're right. I wish there had been stronger, saner voices who said, listen, we need to change the system. But there are basic market-driven, simpler ways to get it done, cleaner ways to get it done. We missed an amazing opportunity.
I think we have, I hate to say this, I've been a lobbyist for 26 years. I've been in Washington for 32 years now. I think we've got a lot of very dumb people in Congress in both parties. I used to think it was sinister and cowardly, but more than cowardly, I think they're dumb. I think they're stupid.
Well, when lobbyists, as you know, tell officials, gee, it's really complicated, you don't understand it, let me write the bill. The answer usually is, because it's followed by a check or a fundraiser. I think these days there are people in Congress, or I want to believe, who are actually smarter about the actual policies that are being debated and can actually go forward with simpler, smarter, better ways to fix the problem.
I had a conversation with Elizabeth Warren the first time about a month ago with a client. She's, for a law professor, she's dumb as a rock. These people are not. I expected something. I expected a savant. I mean, I expected to meet somebody like Karl Marx, I guess. I mean, she's not that. These people aren't that bright.
That's right. Plus, they don't know what they don't know. They get frustrated when you try to explain that things are complicated. And she believes, for example, that the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, actually develop the overwhelming amount of drugs that come to the market. And that's just not true. And
that's the biggest joke. Even I know that.
But when you point the facts out to her, she gets angry and shuts you down and accuses you of being the pocket of this industry or that industry. People have to be willing to have an open, honest conversation and learn from those conversations rather than digging their heels up.
She's one of the most ferociously closed-minded, at least with a guy like Barney Frank. I mean, he's a communist, but you could have a real discussion with him. He at least would go back and forth, thrust and parry, would analyze your position, would tell you why he didn't agree with it. That Congress is getting dumber. People like Warren, oh my goodness. Let me ask you this. Where do you see this going? All right, now you've got all of these Democrats running in 2020, calling for single payer, calling for overt communism in the health markets. Let's assume it's, a lot of things to think about. Let's assume you did elect a Democrat. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to look at what happened in Vermont, Bernie Sanders' home state. Vermont actually passed a state law calling for Medicare for all. And the Democratic governor of Vermont ultimately had to say, no, we can't do this because I'm not going to pass a bill that's going to raise taxes for all of my citizens at minimum 35%. So at the end of the day, the rhetoric says one thing, but when the rubber hits the road, you've got to raise people's taxes and reduce their choices and ration their care, it all of a sudden doesn't sound so good. So I wonder how much of this gets bandied about. And then at the end of the day, after the election, the fiscal realities become a little bit more real and it gets shelved. Or somebody says, listen, this is nonsense. You're lying to the American public, and I'm not going to vote for you. And basically you have people come to power and you say, listen, we're going to find ways to increase access to quality health care by measuring patient outcomes and value, as opposed to only talking about, for example, the list prices of drugs that nobody pays.
Peter Pitts, no relation to Billy Pitts, founder, Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, former FDA Associate Commissioner, visiting professor, University of Paris Descartes Medical School. Peter, if we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. Taking your emails now, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. We're coming into the 20th century, not the 21st, but the 20th. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family. 703-795-5364. And news will come from the Profiling Project, my organization, right here in Arlington, Virginia, over in Clarendon, that will announce a major investigation this week into the death of Bree Payton. And you get the inside scoop, and you hear it first because you listen to Behind the Curtain. Well, joining us now, Jarrett Stepman, contributor at the Daily Signal, and we are going to talk all about AOC. For those of you who don't know, and I bet most of you do, that's Miss Ocasio-Cortez, the new congresswoman from Queens, New York, who actually holds a district once held by, you guessed it, Geraldine Ferraro. Remember that name? Jarrett, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Did you know she has Jerry Ferraro's old district?
I did know that, and I would actually say that she's very much to the left, incredibly, of Geraldine Ferraro. And
she's even to the left of Ferraro, which is very difficult because Ferraro was to the left of Mondale, if you remember, and that's not easy.
That's correct.
That's a lot of left. Well, okay, so AOC now, I guess the question, the same question really as for Trump. Is she crazy or crazy like a fox? Because obviously she's got a mind, she's got an education. I mean, look at this making crazy statement. She said, it's okay to be factually incorrect as long as I'm morally right. Now, that's the kind of thing that Trump would say, right? But maybe she does all this just to keep the media cycle going.
Well, I do think that's part of it, and she is very good at keeping the media cycle going. I think more than a lot of other politicians. I think that's why she's not somebody to be underestimated in this debate, especially because a lot of young people, especially millennials, identify with the word socialism now. It's not something that's entirely uncommon. Just a few years ago, many Democrats would have rejected the idea that they were socialists. It was a common attack, and now she openly embraces it. And for many of young and millennial cohorts, this is seen as a badge of honor, many of whom would say they would rather live under a socialist economy than a capitalist one. So it does show that she kind of represents a new wave of voters and Americans who believe in ultimately very extreme views, although many have ideas that are all over the map and many are quite uninformed. They do have political strength, and they do have a potential to push some of these radical ideas on America.
So her appeal goes well beyond just Hispanics in Queens or Hispanics even nationally. Is she now becoming the new Bernie, where this is a young face to take away Bernie's young millennial support? Bernie's pushing 80. Is that what's going on here?
Absolutely. I think she's definitely got the kind of Bernie groundswell that was certainly a contingent within the Democratic Party for a long time that's been building, and Bernie kind of laid the groundwork for people like Ocasio-Cortez and a lot of other young, very far left progressives who identify as socialists. They call themselves often democratic socialists, but, of course, a lot of socialists, when they get to power, come through democratically. People vote for a lot of bad things. But, yes, she absolutely represents a a kind of new wave of far left kind of politicians, and there's no question that she has a lot of support around the country, and she is kind of this fresh new face for some very bad old ideas.
So what maybe the socialists is the left finally figuring out how to market itself? Maybe the left has never been very good at marketing. They're not giving us Dukakis, Mondale, and Jimmy Carter anymore. Or not even, maybe they're finding young, attractive women. Is that the new model for the left?
Well, sure. I mean, I think we're seeing the difference between her and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's struggled to really get a lot of support and a lot of media recognition. I think a lot of it has been kind of laughable, but Ocasio-Cortez is very good at using things like social media. She's good at really getting voters to identify with her. They think of her as somebody, there's an old joke about President George W. Bush. People think they could get a drink with him. Well, people think they could go to brunch with Ocasio-Cortez. That's the way a lot of millennials see this, and it is appealing and tries to get a lot of voters who maybe don't participate in politics to get out and change things, and in many cases bring these kind of radical ideas that they may not fully understand, but they find her personally appealing enough that they'll support her anyway.
Why are young people flocking to these far left-wing ideas? Do we know, like, I used to have a beautiful young woman before she went away to college, used to be on my show. And she said, her name was Jenkins, and I said, Jenkins, why do you support Bernie? Why do all these young people support Bernie? And I said, what is it that you like? You worried about the environment? Is it gay rights? Is it social? What do you like? She said, no, it's none of those things. Bernie offers us free college. Is that what's going on here?
I think certainly the offer of free things and a kind of potential utopia on Earth is certainly appealing. It's amazing, especially young people who've grown up in the United States, which has been the most prosperous, successful country on Earth and has had so much success because we haven't embraced ideas like those of Ocasio-Cortez. I think a lot of young people don't quite understand.
They wouldn't have
iPhones. Are appealing.
They wouldn't have iPhones had we been a socialist economy.
Well, absolutely not. And I think that's something that needs to be pointed out. I think a lot of these people, when they hear socialism, they think, well, that's just something that pulls down the rich and helps the little guy. And the truth is, if you know about the history of socialism and communism, those ideologies, they really only help a well-connected political elite at the top. I suggest that they read the book Animal Farm by George Orwell that shows that those who bring out these ideas often, of course, end up at the top of that pyramid. And the regular people, they get crushed.
Jared, as we know, that's a wonderful way to conclude this segment because, as we know, all pigs are equal, but some pigs are more equal than other pigs. Jared Simpson, contributor at the Daily Signal, thank you so much.